What's up, guys? Today I wanted to do another video talking about bass, and more specifically I'm going to talk about Neuro-Bass. Um, let's just start with some examples of the sounds you can make with this technique, and then I'll get into the what, why, and how. So that last example was a bit more simple, but that's okay. That's just a quick example I mocked up. So these neural bases, kind of the idea behind them is kind of different from a lot of other neural bases. What you see a lot is this like this sine compression technique from Frequent, right? Like where you take like a simple static input sound and then you distort that, and then you have a bunch of filters moving around, and then you distort that again, and then you have more filters moving around, and you just rinse and repeat until you build up these complex layers of filtering and distortion, and you get really unique sounds. And that's really cool. That's a really cool technique. But I also think there's other techniques to make neural basses that are really interesting and worth checking out. So that's what I'm going to go into in my technique for making these kinds of sounds. So let's start with this first example, right? The way I made this sound is with a bunch of modulation chains, but you can see that there's only three. And they're all going to the synth. There's some macros in Serum that I've assigned to a whole bunch of parameters, and I'm moving those around. And that's basically the core idea of this technique, is to have a bunch of macros in your synth controlling all sorts of different parameters. And then if you have like three macros, which I find to be the sweet spot, although I guess that's kind of up to personal taste. If you have these three macros, you essentially have a three-dimensional space of modulation to explore, right? It's similar how you have these like pads, you can assign like some parameters here, and then you have a two-dimensional space. But I'm basically doing the same but in 3 dimensions, and there's of course no limit, or I guess there's technical limits in Serum. There's like only 4 macros, but you can do as many modulations as you want, as many dimensions as you want. Although personally I prefer 3, because I feel like that's where you get enough possibilities to really explore a whole wide variety of different sounds, whereas at the same time it's not too overwhelmingly complex and you don't have too much choice. So yeah, let's just get into an example of how I make this stuff, right? Starting with the sound design, and then later actually kind of designing a riff. So we set up a MIDI channel, add Serum to it, and yeah, let's disable all of these tracks for the sake of my CPU. I usually just start by putting in like one, oh god, one really long note. That's kind of loud. One really long note, and then just fucking around with it. So I'm just gonna start with like a wavetable. This wavetable is kind of crazy, so let's like take the last bit of it, just remove beginning to selected, and then morph crossfade real quick. Alright, so now I have this wavetable, and I can control that with the macro. Maybe, yeah, take this range. I like this range because then we have some kind of growliness in the beginning and some womps in the end. So we can do that, and then we can do just another random ass wavetable. Who knows? That looks cool. So we'll have that maybe sit an octave higher. We're gonna mute it, and then we're gonna have it send the FM signal to the first oscillator, right? Mute it, of course. Nice, so we get that FM sound. We can even modulate the wavetable with this as well, so we get even more variations. And one thing that you can already notice now is the sound of one macro depends on the position of the other macro. And in the end, this will get particularly interesting when we have three macros all doing their own different things. And then we can just explore which movements work well together. And that's a whole lot of fun. It's very creative, but in like an easy way, I think. So yeah, with that done, we can do a filter. I find that these phasers work well for kind of neuro style basses. So don't want to cut out too much bass there. Because how else are we going to win the loudness wars, right? So yeah, now we can add maybe some distortion. Right, maybe some stereo width before the distortion. Oh, and you can hear that. That's like really, that's really resonant. Some peaks and like really nasty frequencies. Like stuff up here just sounds really not pleasant. So the way that I would deal with that is I would use some kind of multi-band compression to kind of keep all of the frequency ranges kind of in check, to not have them peak out too high or dip too low. For example, like the sub bass, I wouldn't want to lose all my subs when I find a combination of macro positions that does that. I wouldn't want to lose all my subs, so I want to pull that up a bit. But also at the same time, I don't want the high end to get extremely loud with some combination of these knobs, right? And the thing is, you cannot possibly account for all of these knob positions in your synthesizer, right? You cannot possibly foresee which of these combinations of knob positions are going to be nasty and which are going to be nice. So it's also just a matter of experimentally, while you're making your riff, finding positions that work well together and just tackling the problems like that. And then maybe at the end you can go over it, do sort of a cleanup pass where you just have like an EQ with like some peaks and notches that kind of automates to push down some of the nasty peaks. So yeah, there's different ways you deal with that, but it's a load of fun, I think. So yeah, we can maybe from here introduce some more textures. If you use like the chorus, we can really have this like controlling the depth knob maybe. Ooh, there's some really cool sounds in there. So yeah, that's just basically how I go around this. I just assign a macro and I move it around and see if I like it, and then if I don't, I maybe adjust the range a bit, or I just move it to a different parameter. And you just keep on doing this until you feel like you have enough going on in your sound. I think I want to maybe add a few more things. It could be a cool thing to use that one AU5 trick where you load up like a sine wave into your noise oscillator, you key track it, and then I guess the key tracking is optional. But anyway, then you use it as like a modulation source, right? So I'm just going to do like on the frequency here of this EQ, we're going to select noise oscillator, and then let's make it like a notch. Right, and then we can also control this with a macro. I mean, of course, right? We can even set it to be a bipolar. So we can maybe pitch this up to like Oh yeah, in the mid-range that's really slimy. Whoa! Oh, that gets really metallic all of a sudden. Yeah, I think at this point we have already some pretty cool things happening with some of these macros, and I can already tell that some of these combinations are going to be just wild. So yeah, what I would do from this point is I would just select all of these macros here so we can automate them, and then whoops, yeah, just all open these all in like some automation lanes, and then we can just kind of start designing a riff. And I'm just gonna do like a standalone riff. I'm not gonna add like kicks or snares or anything, so bear with me. But it's just gonna be to kind of demonstrate what you can do with this, what you can get out of this. So I noticed that this first knob is kind of sensitive. You don't want to do too big of movements on that, so maybe. Oops. Yeah, so you get the idea. You can just start exploring this three-dimensional space of modulation and find the cool wobbles and warbles and growls and shit. Yeah, and then from there, what you do with it is totally up to you. You can resample this and like chop it up and use chunks in your track. Or you can just have this be like one main bass that's playing throughout most of the drop. Um, so yeah, there's tons of cool creative possibilities there, I think. So I encourage you to explore it for yourself. If you have any questions, let me know. You can hit me up in the comments, on Twitter, on my Discord server. Shameless plug, I post snares there, so you can download those if you want. Yeah, thanks for watching. Share this video with your friends, and cheers. See you in the next one.